you so much, Margot. It's been some years ago. In fact, part of this story I have shared with you before, but at our previous house, when we purchased it, it was a brick house, but previous owners had painted the brick white. And in the end, I don't know necessarily why you would paint brick, but they did, and it looked fine. The problem is anything that you paint, eventually you have to repaint, right? Because nothing lasts forever, including paint on brick. Anyway, after having lived there for several years, one of the things that we had noticed, and at that point I believe we were starting to think about the prospect of looking to move, and on the chimney, in this particular house it was brick, but the chimney went up through the middle of the house, and so there was some exposed brick around the center of the roof. And up near the very top, there were several bricks where the paint had effectively chipped off, and it was pretty noticeable even from the road. And we decided we want to get that touched up. And on some other spot on the side of the house, I was able to get a sample. I went to the store to be able to get some paint that matches this. I get a whole gallon of this because that's the best deal on a gallon of paint. And so I get set up, get the ladder on the side of the house, stir the paint, or take the lid off, stir the paint up, get a brush in my pocket, and I start to head up the ladder with this gallon of paint. I'm going to fix this. And especially from the ground, a roof doesn't look that high, right? And so anyway, I get up there, and once I've transitioned from the ladder onto the roof, I get, 4 or 5 steps or ooches up on it, and I mean absolutely paranoid fear. I mean like irrational, I can't make sense of it. I get like paralyzed. I am just frozen. And my first thought is the fire department is going to have to get me off of this roof. And that's the honest truth. I thought there's going to be some ladder truck getting me and my gallon of paint off the roof. And Caroline is down on the ground at the base of the ladder, and she's trying to coax me back into normalcy and says, okay. Anyway, I finally ooched down, and she said she'll take care of this. And so I hand her the paint and the brush, and Caroline gets on the roof. She gets up further than I do. Same thing happens. She gets really scared. Here's the problem. It's bad to be scared on the roof. It's really bad to be scared on the roof with an open gallon of paint. So we need to get her and the paint off the roof. And so Caroline gets to a point, because she's like, I don't think I can I need to kind of Spider-Woman this thing down. I need to somehow get this paint to you. And so she got as far as she could, and we thought, if she could just kind of let it slide to me. And so, I don't know, we decided that's a good enough idea. And so she does that, and it makes it most of the way before it turns over. Anyway, I've got about a stretch this far between the gutter up the side of the roof, where I've got this dark shingled roof now with white paint on it. And so very quickly, we'll get Caroline off the roof. Very quickly, I'll get up there from the ladder with hose and brush. And thankfully, I was able to get that taken care of. Except at this point, we probably spent an hour with a whole lot of terrified fear, panic-stricken, freezing, stuck to the roof. And my bricks still aren't painted. And I noticed across the street there were some guys doing some work. I don't know what they were doing, if they were replacing windows, exactly what it was that they were doing, but I thought they just might be comfortable enough to get up there. And so I went over there and I asked the guys a question. I said, listen, I will give, anybody that's willing, I'll give you $50 if you will go up there and paint. It's like 3 bricks. It's nothing. I knew that was ridiculously overpaying, but at this point, if I had $1 million, I'd give it, because I'm not going back up there. And so they looked at me like, you, my friend, are an idiot, but I will take an idiot's money. And so he says, I'll be glad to do that. And so he comes over to the house. The ladder's already set up. And he's getting ready to go up, but let me go to the truck real quick. And he comes back from the truck, and he's got a little plastic disposable cup. And he puts about that much paint in that disposable cup. And I looked at him as though he had just cured cancer. Why didn't I think of that? I'm up there with I got 3 bricks. I got a whole gallon. Man, Einstein has got the plastic cup. Why didn't I think of that? Going up on the roof with an open gallon of paint, that is a really bad idea. Now here's the question. That is a bad idea, but why did I go on the roof with a gallon of paint if it was a bad idea? I didn't know it was a bad idea. I didn't know it was a bad idea. Because hopefully it is that you and I, just as people, hopefully it is just as people that we have enough sense that if somehow we had the information brought to us where we might be able to have all the cards on the table, if we know that something is a bad idea, we won't actually pursue it. We won't actually go down that road. That's my aim this morning in sharing as we continue to walk in this series through the book of Genesis, looking at some of the bad family mistakes that are made, to help you to see something that is a really bad idea for your family and in your life, that all sorts of bad things are going to come from it. And so I want you to see it today as a bad idea so that you make sure that going forward, not just as a person, but as a family that hopefully is trying to take seriously the prospect of following Jesus, this isn't a part of your life. What's that? It's favoritism. Favoritism. Why is it that favoritism is such a bad idea? We see the answer to that question in Genesis chapter 37. Genesis chapter 37, if you would look with me in your Bibles there. There, in this chapter, of course, we've skipped now about 20 chapters from where we were last week. We left Abraham. We've got Abraham who's had a son whose name is Isaac. Isaac has a son whose name is Jacob, and Jacob is in this story here. Starting in verse 1 of Genesis 37, Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. These are the family records of Jacob. At 17 years of age, Joseph tended sheep with his brothers. The young man was working with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought a bad report about them to their father. Now Israel, that's Jacob, loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was a son born to him in his old age, and he made a robe of many colors for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. Then Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said, "Listen to this dream I had. There we were binding sheaves of grain in the field, and suddenly my sheaf stood up, and your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." "Are you really going to reign over us?" his brothers asked him. "Are you really going to rule over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream and told it to his brothers. "Look," he said, "I had one other dream, and this time the sun, moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." He told his fathers and brothers, and his father rebuked him. "What kind of dream is that you've had? Am I and your mother and your brothers really going to come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. All right, this is a classic example of not only the presence of favoritism, but why it is, communicating to us why it is that favoritism is such a bad idea. And there's a few reasons based on what we see here. And the first is this. Favoritism is such a bad idea because it is based on no good reason. It is based on no good reason. All right, so I said just a moment ago that you had, when last we left Genesis, we were introduced to Abraham. We're several generations now beyond that. So we have Abraham, his son Isaac. Isaac has a son Jacob. And we have Jacob here. Jacob has 12 sons. And among these sons, we find number 11 is Joseph. And for the remainder of the book of Genesis, Joseph is going to be the central figure, the central character in what is going on there. And verse 3 informs us of reality in that home, that Jacob loved Joseph more than his other sons. That Jacob loved Joseph more than his other sons. I hope we can all agree with this statement. It shouldn't be that way in a home, where you shouldn't have a mom and a dad, or a mom or a dad, that loves one child more than they love another one. It ought to be such that every child is loved equally by their parents. Now, the relationship is going to be different because our personalities are different. Our kids' personalities are different. But there ought to be no difference in the amount of love that is felt between one parent and any child. And at the end of the day, and perhaps you've heard this said before, and in truth, I hope my kids are able to say this one day, that every one of them, I want them to feel like they're my favorite. so that there are no favorites, because it should be such that everyone is loved equally, but it wasn't that way in Jacob's house. And this unequal affection resulted in some unequal treatment. And what he did was that he, according to the end of verse 3, made, or had made perhaps, a robe, a cloak, a coat of many colors for Jacob. Now, a multicolored garment for us is no big deal, but it's likely you're aware of the fact that at this point in history, a multicolored garment was a really big deal. If you were to go into the store back at this point in history, it would have been the most boring looking thing you've ever seen. Oh, would you like dark brown or slightly less dark brown? How about a lovely dark beige or a tan? Everything would have been essentially shades of brown. And so if you had something or were able to have some garment that had multicolors in it, I mean, that was a rare treasure, because among other things, dyes were so expensive. And to get a single dye could be quite expensive, much less to have multiple colors and multicolored fabric that is woven together. This was an enormously, egregiously generous gift that Jacob gave to Joseph. Why did he do so? Because he loved him more. Hopefully you can say, all right, this is a case study in what favoritism actually looks like. So you have a father loving one child to a degree that he does not love the others, and that results in him doing things for that one child that he will not do for the others. It is flagrant, egregious favoritism. But here's the question. Why is Jacob demonstrating favoritism towards Joseph? The text tells us. At the end of verse 3, it says that he loved Joseph more than his other sons because Joseph was the son born to him in his old age. He was born to him in his old age. Now, on the surface, you may see that or read that statement and think, well, maybe I kind of get that. And some of you maybe had a child that was born perhaps far later than you ever thought you might even be able to have children. And you could say, maybe I kind of perhaps maybe get that. But what's going on here? Was it that Jacob loved Joseph just because he was older with him than he was with the others? That maybe he was the baby. But the problem is Joseph was not even the baby. Benjamin was the baby. Yes, Joseph was born late in life, but Benjamin was even born later in life for Jacob. Now, the Bible tells us that Jacob lived to be 147 years old. And I won't bore you with the details of the math that gets you to this point, but when Jacob gets married, he is 84 years old. So Jacob gets married at 84. That means, so he had 12 sons. The first one is not born likely until he is 85 years old. Think about that for a minute. I don't know how you'd get up in the morning. I don't know why you would get up in the morning. He's likely 85 years old when the first child is born. Joseph now is number 11. So he's Jacob at the earliest is in his 90s. And so, again, on the surface you might think, well, Joseph is loved. He's favored by Jacob because he's the one that's born late in life. Jacob has been on Social Security for 20 years before the first child is born. He's been old now forever. So you say, well, Joseph was the one that was born to him in his old age. They were all born to him in his old age. We'll say, well, he was born, he wasn't even born last. He's not the baby. He's number 11. He's near the tail end, but he's not even the caboose. What I'm trying to say to you and try to underscore is the fact that there was legitimately no rational reason for Joseph getting a favored status, for Jacob feeling towards him what he did not feel to the others. Oh, I love this one because he was born to me when I was old. They were all born when you were old. Well, he was near the end. Well, Benjamin's at the very end. You didn't love him more. You loved Joseph more. What I'm trying to get you to see is that there is, in the end, nothing logical. There's nothing rational about this. And in that, there's an important point. Ultimately, favoritism is rooted in no good reason. It's rooted in illogical suppositions. There is no good reason, there is no good reasoning that would lead you to demonstrate favoritism. Now, when I was in college, I lived in the dorm, and you're aware of this. Guys are not only dumb, we're nasty too. And so germs, yeah, who cares about that? And the dorm, guys' dorm, is just kind of a germ factory. It's probably where COVID started. Anyway, I remember it was the case, and the other thing, guys are cheap though too. And so, for example, and I'm not talking about even alcoholic beverage. I'm just talking about a drink, because you couldn't have alcohol on the campus. But if you just had a drink, if you set it out, if you left that unattended, it was likely that somebody may take it. But there was one guy in the dorm that he guarded against that, because everybody knew that when he opened a drink or a bottle, he'd spit in it first. You know whose drink you're not going to take? You're not going to mess with his. Why? Because he'd spit in it. You're like, yeah, I don't want any part of that. Now, I want you to understand that we do something very much like that when it comes to argumentation, when it comes to logic. And we call it poisoning the well. And what that means is that we project something adverse on a subject so that from the very beginning of the discussion you think less favorably of it. You think poorly of it. For example, I could say, only idiots wear top hats. I mean, if anybody that wears a top hat is an absolute buffoon. I mean, only dumb people would do that. And so what I'm trying to do is to poison the well, so that anytime you would think, or anytime you would observe someone wearing a top hat, that you'd look at Mr. Peanut, and you would say, man, that's the dumbest creature that's ever lived. Look, he's wearing a top hat, because only dumb people wear a top hat. Why would you conclude that? It's because I've poisoned the well. All right? My goal is, I believe part of the goal of the text in this is to poison the well of favoritism so that you effectively get spit in the bottle. That you realize this is bad. This is bad because it's based on no good, no logical, no sound reasoning. It's almost just arbitrary that you would demonstrate affection for one in the home that you would not do for the other. Because in the end, that's not based on anything that makes sense. In truth, there's not only application for us as it relates to the home. I believe that there is significant application as it relates to us and what's going on in culture. Unless you have just buried your head in the sand, you're aware of the fact that racial tensions in this country are just off the charts. Things are insanely tense and have been for some period of time now. But let me ask you this. With respect to the whole issue of racism and race relations in this country or around the world, I want you to understand that in a very general sense, ultimately all expressions of racism are expressions of what? It's favoritism. Isn't it? Where one group is favored by one individual or one group of people against another. I mean, in the end, all that racism is, at its core, is favoritism. Well, on what basis is racism rooted in favoritism? Well, it's because a particular skin color of people is preferred by another group of individuals or another group of people from another skin color. Well, how much sense does that make? You have white people, brown people, black people, Asian people. I don't know. Keep picking shades and colors. And all. Do you notice there's a common word in all of that? It's people. It's people. So in the end, why is it that one group would be favored over another group of people? Because in the end, they're all just people. People. What I believe this text can help us to do is not just in our families, but even in our culture, especially in the lives of those that are the followers of Jesus, there's no place for this. There is no place for this because, among other reasons, it is based on no good reason. But not only that, we see in this passage that favoritism is such a bad idea because it promotes divided relationships. It promotes divided relationships. This is really easy to see. In verse 4, this comes on the heels of the statement that Jacob loved Joseph more than anybody else, more than any of the brothers. Was that a state secret? No, everybody knew it. All the brothers knew it. Why? Because for no other reason, we got the coat of many colors. Who else gets that? No one else. Who's wearing that? Joseph. Who's wearing it every day? Joseph. Who wears it to supper? Joseph. Who wears it to bed? Joseph. They see this all day, every day. And we're told that, verse 4, when his brothers saw their father loved him more than all his brothers. So there's no uncertainty about this. Everyone knows. The entire family knows this. What do they feel? They felt hatred towards their brother. In fact, not only did they feel hatred towards him, but it says it got to the point they could not bring themselves to speak peaceably to him. What does that mean? It means that they could not even engage in plain, normal conversation. It could be that Joseph walks in, parades in with his multicolored coat in the morning to sit down. He's getting a bowl of Cheerios. No, it was probably grape nuts back then, so just something worse. Write that in your Bible. That's a terrible cereal. Anyway, so he walks in, sits down with his bowl of grape nuts. One of the other brothers walks in and says, "Hey, do you think it's going to rain today?" It's likely that one of the other brothers say, "If it does, I hope it's enough to drown you." I mean, there was no prospect even of basic, general conversation, no common courtesy, no basic civility, because this favoritism is going on. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think, or do I think, that Joseph played into this? I really do. I think he loved, and who doesn't love being the favorite, right? Because life is easier. Life's a little better. Life's a little simpler. You get the coat that nobody else gets. My guess is, and I believe the context points us in this direction, that Joseph paraded this favoritism. That he was rubbing his brothers' noses in the face of this reality on a regular basis. I believe that. However, I do not believe that ultimately though Joseph was a participant, I do not believe that this was his fault. Ultimately, this division, this hatred, this lack of civility, this discourteous, awful, run-amok relationship and division that occurs in Jacob's family is because of Jacob. It's because of him caring for one and doing for one what he would not do for another. And what did it do? It produced divided relationships. It produced absolutely divided relationships because of what Jacob did. Now, it is important to understand and to get etched in your mind that favoritism always does this. In any aspect of life, and especially in the life of the family, favoritism always produces divided relationships. Why is it important to understand that? Because hopefully you understand this is what it always does. Why? Let me illustrate it this way. Last week, I wore a brand new pair of black shoes. Thank you for noticing. First pair of black dress type shoes that I have bought in fact, since coming to Greensboro. Next month, it'll be 10 years since coming to Gate City. I hadn't bought a pair of black dress shoes in Greensboro. So those were bought even when we were in Charlotte. So I've gotten good wear out of them. And in truth, they still looked pretty good. They really did. And they were very, very comfortable. They had that particular pair of shoes had a rubber sole on them. They were very comfortable. And there was so much I liked about them. But at some point, maybe a couple of years ago, I started to have some problems with them where that rubber separated from the leather portion of the shoe. And so I bought some shoe glue, and I would glue them, and I'd clamp them, and it would hold for a while. The problem is, though, where it was coming undone was up here at the front part. And so the last time I wore those shoes, I remember I was walking up the center aisle, and as I'm going up that twice, my foot catches the carpet, and I almost fall. And the healing service isn't too much later in the month, and so it's a big deal. And so anyway, I almost fall twice. And after that, I decided I'm never going to wear those shoes again. Those shoes I'm done with. Why? Because they caused me to fall They cause me to trip. They are a hazard to me. How much of the time? Now, all the time. And so what happens when you realize that? You get rid of them. You quit doing that. You quit wearing those things. Why is it important to understand that favoritism always produces divided relationships? So that hopefully we will quit that. And that we will decide, I do not, in the life of my family at all, I don't want that to be present in any form or fashion. But again, this has broader context into what's going on in our communities and across the country and even around the world. Again, all these racial tensions that we've talked about, in the end, those are expressions of what? Favoritism. And what does it do? It produces divided relationships. Why do you think that tensions are so high today? Why do you think there's such animosity? Why do you think we're operating in the red? It's because that's exactly, always what favoritism produces. It's a bad idea. We need to decide, I don't want that part of my life. I don't want that part of my family. I don't want it part of my community. I don't want in any form or fashion, because it's a bad idea. Because it's based on no good reason. It produces divided relationships. The last thing you see in this passage is this: favoritism fosters arrogance that impedes your witness. Favoritism fosters arrogance that impedes your witness. As you get through this passage and through this chapter, at least I do, maybe you don't, but the sense is that Joseph is, well, it's not the sense is that Joseph is treated, he is actually demonstrably treated better. He is treated superior to that of his brothers. Jacob is doing for Joseph what he will not do for others. For all the other 11, he doesn't do for them like he does for Joseph. He's treating him superior, and what do you think Joseph begins to feel? I think he begins to feel superior. I may be number 11, but as far as I'm concerned, that's just a double number 1. I'm 1 squared. Look at me. And so he's treated special, and I believe that begins to affect him on the receiving end, so that he thinks that he is special. That he begins to square his shoulders and click his heels and think, man, I am something. Certainly as compared to this bunch of other duds, my brothers, better than every one of them. All right, so I believe he's thinking, he's treated superiorly. He begins to act and think that he is superior, and what happens? He begins to have some dreams. And the first dream, starting in verse 7, he says, hey guys, the dream I had is that we were out binding sheaves of grain, and so we've cut it, we're binding them together, and so I had my pile, you had your pile, but then all of a sudden, my sheaves of grain, they're standing up, but all of yours are like bowing down. Then he had another dream. In this dream, he says, I had this other one where the sun, the moon, and 11 stars bowing down to me. It was just so strange. Fiddle-dee-dee. How going on? Can't believe that this has happened. All right, so he had these dreams. Why do you think he shared them? Do you think it's because he thought, I have no idea that there could be potentially any significance to that? They're not suggesting anything. I don't think that for a second, because immediately when he says this, after each dream, what is the response from the family? They're saying, so are you trying to say that we're going to be bowing down to you? The implication of these dreams is completely transparent, and Joseph knows it. And what does he do? He still says it anyway. Why? I think just for spite. Why? Because he's been treated superiorly, and finally he thinks that he is superior. He gets cocky. His head gets big, and he's going to share this. Now let me ask you, is there significance to these dreams? If you're familiar with the rest of the book of Genesis, absolutely it is. What's getting ready to happen is that out of and birthed out of the hatred they feel for Joseph, they are going to ultimately sell him off as a slave. Joseph is going to wind up in Egypt, and through a circuitous route, he's going to wind up as number 2, the prime minister, essentially, of Egypt. And in that position, completely estranged from his family for who knows how many years, he's finally going to ultimately save his brothers and all their families He's going to save his father and all the servants. He's going to save them from a famine. He's going to save their lives. And literally, because as the book of Genesis unfolds, they're going to be bowing down and showing him respect unknowingly. They won't realize at that point, oh, that's Joseph. Since that is the case, what are these dreams? These dreams are effectively prophecies, aren't they? That they are foretelling what is to come. So here's the question: where did those dreams, where did those visions come from? I think they came from God. It's not coincidence, it's not happenstance that this has occurred, that Joseph has had these dreams. I believe that God has impressed this on Joseph. He shares this with his family, but how is that received? Completely thumbs down. Why? Because favoritism has been at work. And what it has done in Joseph's life is to foster arrogance in such a way that even when he is sharing what has come from God, it can't be heard. Think about it this way. I can't stand, if I'm driving down the interstate, I can't stand to be stuck behind an 18-wheeler. Don't you like? I don't like that, right? Because when you're back behind, you can't see anything. You don't know what's around the corner. You don't know what's ahead. But even in town, especially, I hate to get stuck behind a tractor trailer at a traffic light, at an intersection. Why? Because when the light turns green, or if the light is turning yellow or turning red, I can't see it. I can't see. I don't get the information. I can't receive what I need to receive. Why? Because that truck is too big. That's exactly what favoritism does. It produces big heads. Massively big heads that others cannot see around. And even the messages that come from God that need to be and could be and should be heard by others, those messages effectively get roadblocked. Why? Because favoritism's at work. And what that does is that it produces arrogance that impedes your witness all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. What I want you to see, in short, favoritism is a really, really, really bad idea. Listen, I went up on the roof with a gallon of paint because I didn't know it was a bad idea. Maybe it is that favoritism has been at work in your life, maybe in your family's life, maybe in your neighborhood, in your workplace. It's been operating in your life, even as someone that's a follower of Jesus, because you didn't really know fully what a bad idea it is. So, what do? Do you just kind of will yourself to do better? I mean, in the end, that's what our cultural leaders are trying to do. We just need to put a stop to this. Let me just tell you, that is a futile effort. It is a futile attempt to say we're just going to will ourselves to do better. Do you know why? Because the desire to do this is ingrained in our DNA as affected by sin. So what do we do? Let me lead you to think about the right-hand side of your Bible. Romans chapter 2, verse 11, Paul says this: there is no favoritism with God. There is no favoritism with God. He doesn't play favorites at all. So if you, if we are going to get beyond this, what does that say? I can't do it unless I have Him helping me, empowering me, making this possible. So, to the one who shows no favoritism, will you ask Him to help you from practicing this bad idea in your life? Will you bow your heads with me? Every person is easily entrapped by favoritism in its various forms. It's part of coming into this world as broken people. It just is. That's why it's always been around, since sin came into the world. I hope you realize that it doesn't, for those who have a relationship with Jesus, it doesn't have to be this way. It shouldn't be this way in your families. It shouldn't be this way in your spheres of influence, how you treat people, whether in your home or strangers down the street. It doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. But I'm just going to tell you, you can't will yourself to get there. You've got to have some help. You've got to have help from one that is greater than favoritism, one that is not trapped by it, who's not ensnared by it. As the Holy Spirit is speaking to your heart, as maybe He's helped you to see some stuff that's true of you based on what we've seen here, maybe to varying degrees you've operated like a Jacob. As God's showing you that needs to change, will you ask for His help? Will you say, Lord, this is a part of me that I don't want it to stay like this. And I can't make myself better, but I'm asking you, I need you to help me with this. Not just today, but tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day. This is going to be an ongoing struggle and I'm going to fight, but I want to do it with your help. Will you ask Him for that? I promise you, He'll favorably respond. But maybe it is that this whole idea of asking God for anything is kind of a strange thought because you don't have a personal relationship with Him. That's a number you've never dialed. You don't know how to be connected with the Lord because you don't have a relationship with Him. If that's you, at the end of this service, if you're here in person, would you find me? Would you find Jamie? We would love to share with you about a God who made you, who plays no favorites, who sent Jesus to die for you just like He did for me and every other person in this room and across the earth, so that you could have a meaningful, personal relationship with Him now and for eternity. We want to share with you how you can experience that. If you're watching online, will you call us? Will you email us? Will you reach out to us so that we can help you? I just believe that God, through His Word, through His Spirit, He's spoken today. As He's saying things to you that you need to do, ways in which you need to respond, will you just talk to Him for a moment? As Karen softly plays, will you just take advantage of this opportunity to say to God what He's encouraging you to say and the decisions He's wanting you to make? Lord, among those who have a relationship with you, things are to be different. They should be different because you change us from the inside out. You don't just make us better. You take that which is dead and make it alive. And you're in the process, among those that are in a relationship with you, of making us more like you. And the more it is that we are like you, the more it is that it'll be true of us, that it should be true of us, that as there's no favoritism with you, it shouldn't be found in us, in our homes, in our lives, in our hearts. And I pray as you are convicting us and molding us and trying to cut off some of this that needs to be, that not just during this moment, but as this day unfolds, as these days turn into weeks and months and years, that continues to be something that doesn't ensnare us, because you've made it clear to us it is a terribly bad idea. May our lives, may our homes, may our families reflect that we know you and you can change the life of a person and a family. We say this to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Listen, we are so grateful that you are here today. If you're watching online, thank you for spending part of your day with us online. And just remember, church office closed tomorrow. It's Labor Day. And so Wednesday, though, we're kicking back, or we have resumed a normal schedule. So I'm teaching Bible study in here at 10, 6:15 at night. Students and children begin. I start with adults in the choir room at 6:30. We would love, if you haven't joined us already, to be a part of that. Listen, it's good to see you. God bless you. Did we start? What did we start with last week? Whose turn is it?